Hi and welcome to the Clarity PPM, configuring the CSA video. This video is the third and final video in a three-part video series on installing PPM. CSA PPM has been rebranded as Clarity PPM. While this video was originally created for CSA PPM 15.5.1, it is also valid for Clarity PPM 15.6. In the first video, we downloaded the ISO files from the support website, extracted them, and installed Tomcat in Java. In the second video, we installed PPM. In this video, we will configure the CSA. Let's log into the CSA. After you log in, you can validate the version of PPM that has been installed. You can also confirm the multicast address, multicast port, and Java version. The installation status is incomplete, since we have not configured the database details provided by the database administrator. The server section displays the number of servers in your cluster. Since we are running a single cluster machine, we can see only one server. Let's start configuring CSA so that the installation status turns from incomplete to complete. We click the server or the properties icon to access the Properties tab. Since we specified the multicast address and port while installing PPM, the information is already available here. The most important property you will configure on this screen is the bind address. The bind address is the primary network interface address through which PPM will communicate. If you have multiple systems in a cluster, each system should have a unique bind address. You do not have to add bind address of all cluster systems in a single system by using comma-separated values. Other fields like auto start service, service name, and password are optional. Let's now click the System tab. You can see the location of the Java home directory on this tab. Since we currently support only IPv4 stack, this checkbox is selected by default. PPM only needs Java to run on the server. You only need Java at the client end if you use tools like Open Workbench and SUG. Let's now examine the fields under the General subpage. At this point, you need to make a very important choice between configuring a single currency or a multi-currency system. This is a one-time configuration and cannot be reversed. We are going to use a single currency setup, so we will not check this box. Let's select the default value for the license type field. The check for configuration changes and the check tenant database health fields allow you to poll the system. We recommend that you don't enter any values in these fields. Since PPM is a single tenant application, that field is checked by default. You also need to configure the email server settings so that the PPM server can send you notifications. While we have used localhost for this demonstration, please contact the IT administrator in your organization to get the necessary details. Let's save our changes and click the Database tab. Before we start populating details, let's review a couple of key things we did earlier in the installation. We downloaded the database schema files as a part of the installer and provided it to our database administrator. These schema files contain all the database objects, such as triggers, stored procedures, and tables. In our scenario, we sent these files to our Oracle database administrator, who provided me the information we need to continue the installation. The information includes the database server name, username, password, the SID and the port number. We have provided all this information in our documentation so that you and your database administrator can set up the database for PPM. Ensure that you set all the parameters which we recommend for PPM so that you don't run into performance issues. We have also provided a sample init.ora file. You can allocate your memory based on your usage and sizing guidelines. After your database administrator performs all these activities, you get the details that you are currently seeing on your screen. Let's enter these details in the database section. You have fields for large, small, and index tablespace. In our scenario, we have combined the large and small tablespace in a single tablespace. It's recommended that you keep 2 tablespaces, but since we are doing a small installation, we have used a single tablespace. So, let's update the tablespace details. Let's now provide the hostname for the database. If you are using a non-rack server, which has been configured using SID, you can follow along with this demonstration. If your DBA gives us a JDBC URL, which includes your server and hostname, you can use that value here. So let's enter the hostname, the port details, and the service ID. We are not running Oracle on a service name, so I will not populate this field. Next, let us add a username and password and click Save. If the CSA is not able to communicate with the database, the status will change to unavailable. You can see that the database is available. Let's log out and log in again. After your database details are populated, your installation status changes to complete. However, your installation is not complete, since certain sections need to be configured. Let's select Application Settings. You can see where you installed Tomcat as a part of the installation. If you are integrating PPM with LDAP, you need to select this checkbox. If you want to use SSL with PPM and use the application across the internet, you can specify the details on this screen. Ensure that you don't disable REST API access, because our new user experience is built on REST API. The scheduler entry URL is used when you use Open Workbench or Microsoft Project. We are currently leaving this field blank and may edit it again later. We also have CA Productivity Accelerator to help users adopt PPM. Since we don't plan to use that integration, we are not populating this field. In the Application Instance section, you can specify the name of the PPM application. The RMI port is used internally for Java to communicate with PPM. Please ensure this port is exclusively available for PPM. PPM also allows you to configure Job Scheduler and Process Engine on your application layer. However, we don't recommend this, since we provide a dedicated background engine to run scheduler jobs and Process Engine. Next, let's examine the JVM parameters we provide. It tells you the minimum and maximum memory allocation required for PPM. We have specified it as 2048. Based on your user load and sizing guidelines, this number can go up. We provide examples in our documentation on how you can size your implementation. We have also provided a generic deployment architecture to help you understand the sizing recommendations. Let's review the requirements for a relatively small 100-user environment. We provide the basic architecture of the hardware you would need. We also give you JVM recommendations here. Let's get back to the CSA interface. We do not recommend you change the maximum threads field. We also recommend you don't configure the exception run interval field, since you may overload the system. A couple of other important parameters that you need to focus on are HTTP enabled and HTTPS enabled. Since we are currently running on HTTP, the checkbox is enabled. Let us also update the HTTP entry URL field with the correct value. When users load the URL specified here, they would be able to access PPM. Another detail you need to specify is the Tomcat connector port. If this port is not free, then the PPM application will not load. If you are using single sign-on, you can select this checkbox. If you select the distributed checkbox, all your cache will get stored at the database. That means increased load on the database. We don't encourage you to select this option. The secure session cookie and HTTP-only cookie settings are to be selected based on the security policies of your organization. The next section we will discuss is NSA. NSA is also called Clarity System Administrator in PPM. It is running on the RMI port specified here. You can also see the service name here. We are running CSA on HTTP on the 8090 port. Let's update the entry URL for CSA to ensure it matches the fully qualified domain name. Let's save the changes made on the Application tab. Let's navigate to the Documents and Search tab. Before we make configuration changes here, we need to know if we are storing documents in the NAS storage, local storage, or in the database. If you are running a cluster, you should be using common storage. Since we have installed PPM under the app directory on the C drive, let's create another folder structure there. Then we can take that path and replace it in the index directory field. This is not a storage directory. It's the index directory, which helps your search work effectively in PPM. Similarly, let's update the value of the file store directory field. We don't need to specify any directory size limits or antivirus settings at this point in time. Let's save our changes and configure the Data Warehouse tab. Like PPM schema, we also provide a data warehouse schema. Your database administrator would have given you the details you need to populate this tab. We are going to keep dimension and fact tablespace in a single tablespace, and the index in a different tablespace. If your data volume is expected to grow, it's recommended to have separate tablespaces. Now let's provide the database hosting details. We will provide the host name, port, service ID, and login credentials. Note that we have aliased the username with DWH to separate the data warehouse credentials and the database credentials. We use a database link to allow PPM to communicate with the data warehouse. That link can be created from the PPM application if you have given all the rights to configure the data warehouse. If your DBA has already given you the database link, you can select the custom database link field and specify that link. In our scenario, we are going to create the database link. The next parameter we will discuss is ETL job timeout. The value of this field is currently 600 minutes, or 10 hours. If a job is taking 10 hours, it should be timed out. Let's click Save. The status of connection with Oracle should change from unavailable to available. Let's navigate to the Security tab. We discussed SSL handling in the Applications section. The SSL key store and password will be specified here. Everything that you are saving here gets stored in the properties.xml file. Let's review this file. The database password is visible in this file, and this could lead to serious security issues. You can use the Encrypt Password field to encrypt the passwords in the properties.xml file. Let's see how this works. You can also use the Security tab to provide details on how PPM can integrate with an LDAP server. You can also specify details for SSO integration for PPM. PPM authenticates users by using cookies, header, or parameter. The PPM documentation provides all the information you need to support SSO integration. Let's save our changes and navigate to the Background Server tab. PPM uses the background server to run jobs and process engines. The background server also has a Java parameter. You can decide the sizing based on your requirements. You can also specify the service name here. Let's save our changes. This completes the CSA configuration process. We will discuss reporting in a separate video. Let's deploy and run the PPM app and BG services. Let's check the status of the services. The name of the service matches what we configured in the CSA. Let's enter this command to stop all the services, since we made some changes to the CSA. Let's restart all the services. Let's now enter the admin warm-up command to load your application faster for users. The application will log into itself silently to build up the cache so that users can log in quickly. Let's log into CSA again. Let's select Install History to check the version of PPM. Let's click Servers to view discovered hosts. If a server is not coming up, the network admin may have disabled Autodiscovery. CSA can also read this information from the hosts file on the system. Let's click Add to Hosts file. We can now see 2 servers on this page. Let's navigate to the config folder in PPM and open the hosts file. Even though Autodiscovery is enabled for us, we click the Add to Hosts file button. Hence, we have 2 entries in this file. Let's select Switch to use hosts file. The system will only use the entry in the hosts file. If you want to manually specify the host name for the cluster, enter the host name followed by 9091. 9091 is the beacon port for your server. Let's now switch to using Autodiscovery, where we use the operating system to discover the service. In certain cases, when you make changes to the hosts file, the server may not be visible in the CSA. In such cases, we can log out of CSA and restart the service. Let's log into CSA and select Servers. We can click Refresh to view the server details. Next, let's select All Services. You can stop and start your application and background services from the CSA. However, we recommend you do this from the application server. Let's select the Distribution Overview link. Consider a scenario where you have multiple clusters and want to copy the same file system onto different servers. You can select the servers and distribute the file system. Since we have installed only one server, we don't see additional servers here. The CSA configuration process and the PPM installation process is now complete. You can now log into the PPM application. If you want more information around configuring CSA, you can review the PPM documentation. Thank you for watching this video. For more detailed information about this product, click the information bubble in the top right corner to load the product page.